Good morning, everyone. This is the clerk with a courtesy announcement that this meeting is now being streamed live on the internet.
Thank you, Dave.
Danielle, can we do a mic check when you get a second?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, thank you.
Thank you.
Hello, Akila. Can we do a mic check, please?
Hello.
Good morning.
Good morning. How are you?
I'm well, thank you. How are you?
Doing very well.
Good. Doug, can we do a mic check with you, please?
Yes, good morning, Dave. How are you?
Good morning. I'm well, thank you. How are you?
Great, thank you.
Dr. Smith, when you're ready, can we do a mic check, please?
Can you hear me, David?
I can. You're a little distorted. I'm not sure how close you are to your mic.
I'll try to do better.
That's a little better right there.
Okay, thanks.
Great, thank you. Hi, Steve. Can we do a mic check, please? You're muted.
I sure am.
There we go. Now we got you. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Steve, I'm going to ask you to shut your video off for now, if you would, please.
Happy to.
Thank you. Hello, Supervisor Smidian. Can we do a mic check, please?
Good morning. This is Supervisor Smidian's staff. He will be with us in just a minute.
Thanks, Christine. Got it.
Thank you.
Good morning.
Morning, Supervisor Simidian. How are you?
All is well. Thank you, David. I think we're ready to begin.
Whenever you are, sir.
Recording in progress.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. This is the Santa Clara County Federal Affairs Advocacy Task Force. We are scheduled for 10. That time has arrived. So let's ask the clerk to call the roll and we will call the meeting to order.
Good morning, Vice Chairperson Lee.
Good morning, President.
And Chairperson Simidian.
And present. Thank you. We are both present and accounted for. The meeting is called to order. That takes us to public comment. Public comment is that portion of our agenda set aside for comment by members of the public on non-agendized items. Again, items that are not on our agenda, but that are properly within the jurisdiction of this committee. So let's see. Let me turn to the clerk. Do we have any folks who have signed up for public comment at this point?
We do have a speaker, Mr. Chair.
Great. Let's go ahead and give that speaker up to 3 minutes. And last call for speakers, please, so that we can apportion time fairly. Any other speakers, Mr. Clark?
It remains at one speaker, sir.
All right, let's just hear from that one speaker then, and then we'll move on to the next item. Go right ahead.
Next speaker is Scott Largent. I'm unmuting you. Please accept the unmute. You will have 3 minutes to speak. The timer will start when you begin speaking.
Hi, good morning, everyone. Scott Largent. Just getting to work right now, so kind of stumbling a little bit on the clock in about 15 minutes. So at least I can get my my morning therapy in. I was trying to bring it to everyone's attention that no services were being offered to everyone that lives in the crash zone down from your county building. I kind of keep repeating myself over and over again. The woman that had the baby in the trailer, she was the only one that ended up in a hotel room. And the rest of her family, which are technically illegal, they ended up just being pushed into zone 3 in the middle of a field. It seems so wrong that we would not want to keep that family together. And I always hear excuses that they didn't want to go to a hotel room. And, you know, they were technically offered a room at the Easy 8, but I don't think they want any other family members on drugs. I don't think they want to deal with all just the chaos that goes on in that situation. They also do not give you the ability to cook food in one of those hotel rooms. So you're going to spend so much money going down the street to the 7-Eleven. It's just not going to pan out. So I tracked down all these different shelters in a way. I went through the county shelter hotline because, of course, I'm homeless. And I was really, really shooting for just a safe parking program. I thought that would have worked great. Security during the day. As I go to work, I don't have to worry about my stuff. I don't have to call people to check in. I don't have to drive home during lunch, you know, the whole gig like that. So I've kind of figured things out of what was offered. And they shot back and they said there's an available bed at the BRC, the Vicardo Reception Center, and they have now implemented bunk beds during a pandemic. So I don't know if that's I think I'm more scared of dealing with that than the actual porta-john that's kind of near my RV out there. It's kind of like you gotta debate between the two, which one is worse. That doesn't seem right. It seems like that's something that the health department should get on top of immediately. I track a lot of articles and I watch a lot of stuff online about homeless shelters. And throughout the pandemic, I have not seen bunk beds. So that is very, very strange. You guys also had that massive outbreak at the fairgrounds right now at your county ran shelter, which is the closest shelter to the Vicardo shelter. So I'm puzzled right there. Safe parking programs did not exist, and the little tiny homes, tiny shacks, whatever it was, there was nothing provided other than just pushing everybody down to a field to settle their differences with cans of gasoline and lighting each other's camps on fire. It's pretty shocking. They burnt down the rec center a couple of days ago. There's 5 fires a day in San Jose at homeless encampments, and a lot of these, it's just ridiculous. So, yeah, thank you guys.
That concludes our request to speak.
Forgive me while I unmute for a moment. Thank you very much. And Mr. Largent and others who may be listening, we do ask under public comment that the comments be germane to the jurisdiction of the committee, in this case, Federal Affairs. Wanted to err on the side of inclusion this morning, so let the comments go, but in future we'll ask that comments be relevant to the work of the committee or task force if they are in fact directed to a committee or task force as opposed to the full board. And thank you again for taking your time to be with us this morning. That takes us to item number 3, which is the consent calendar. And we have a proposed consent calendar today that consists solely of the minute approval from prior meeting. Supervisor Lee, are you prepared to make a motion to approve the consent calendar as contained in our published agenda?
Yes, so moved.
Motion by Lee, second by Simidian. Any speakers on the consent calendar, Mr. Clerk?
We have no speakers on this item, sir.
Then call the roll.
Vice Chairperson Lee,
Aye.
Chairperson Simidian.
Aye.
Thank you.
Consent calendar is approved, and that takes us to our regular agenda, of course. And so our first item there is item number 4, which is a report from the chair and the vice chair. Supervisor Lee, anything you want to share under that, just relevant to federal affairs?
Well, no, not much different from what people have been reading in the news regarding the bills. I'm sure we'll be asking more to our lobbyists of our 3.5 trillion bill that's still being debated. And apparently there's been not a whole lot of progress on the fact that the ones who knows are not talking, the type of situation. And now they're looking at the trimming of the bill down to maybe 2. But other than that, that's what I read in the news. Nothing new to report. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Likewise, and we have the opportunity, as you know, excuse me, I was going to say Mr. Clark, but I meant Supervisor Lee, to sit as the Health and Hospital Committee. And one of the other areas of interest at the federal level is the question of what will or won't be moving forward as part of a larger package that addresses some of the health and hospital issues, drug pricing in particular. And I'm hoping we can get some information on that either today or at our next meeting of Health and Hospital, because I think there's some big issues there. But for now, why don't we just say that concludes item number 4.
Chair, may I?
Yes, please.
I do have one issue before I go on. I just want to make sure this is something we could talk about in this board. It's the federal affairs. It's the technical term of this, but I do have some question regarding some state laws regarding conservatorship. Would this be the right place to talk about this, or would this be something that we can go to District C to talk about?
I think my request and recommendation would be that conversation be directed to children, seniors, and families. As the proper place. Although if you wanted to raise it in our Health and Hospital Committee, I would be happy to agendize it there as well. I think there's clearly overlapping jurisdiction in terms of the topic.
Okay, thank you very much.
All right, thank you. Then that takes us to item number 5. Without objection and hearing none, we will deem item number 4 received. Same, that takes us to item number 5, the report from the county executive and or his staff. So let me turn to Dr. Smith and Ms. Christian and see what you would like to share with us at this time.
Danielle will do the report.
Ms. Christian.
Thank you, Chairperson Simidian. Most and all of the items of immediate interest and current interest to the Federal Affairs Advocacy Task Force are being covered under reports today by Prime Policy Group, and then the healthcare report that will be provided by Mr. Margolin. And these issues include the infrastructure package, the reconciliation efforts, which you alluded to previously, Chairperson Simidian, the debt ceiling, and kind of the dynamics of the Build Better Back plan. So don't have anything additional to provide under this report, just that those items, just a preview that those items will be discussed in some agenda items coming up for your meeting.
All right, looks like we're going to put the weight of the world on Prime Policy Group. So I'm sure they're standing by and ready for that. Without objection, hearing none, we will deem item number 5 received. And I'll confirm with the clerk, there was no one waiting to speak on that item.
That is confirmed, sir.
All right, thank you. That takes us to item number 6, which is the report from the Office of the County Council in connection with items of interest to the task force, including, and these are 2 items, Supervisor Lee, that you and I have asked about previously, and therefore are called out. The Dobbs versus Jackson Women's Health Organization and litigation regarding Title IX matters. And so let me turn to Mr. Press, from the County Counsel's office, ask him to give us an update there and on any other matters he thinks he should call to our attention.
Yes, good morning, supervisors. I just would add to that, to the Dobbs and the Title IX items, just a very quick Daca update that I can give after speaking about the first two items. So turning to Dobbs versus Jackson Women's Health Organization, this is a very significant case that is before the US Supreme Court right now this term. And I'll talk a little bit later, but its oral argument is coming up in the not too distant future. But just to provide a wider context for those folks listening in, this is a case that arises out of the state of Mississippi, which enacted its own state law that creates basically a new pre-viability ban on most abortions with few exceptions. And I'll just get into some detail. So this is a Mississippi law known as the Gestational Age Act. And what this does is it limits quote unquote non-therapeutic or elective abortions to those that occur prior to the 15th week of gestation. So the old cutoff used to be 24, or still is 24 weeks. That's the sort of the general consensus for viability, where restrictions are not permissible prior to that. This would take it down to 15 weeks. And if one wanted to seek an abortion after the 15th week of gestation, you would have to, there's only two exceptions in the state law. One is for a medical emergency, which is defined as a condition necessary to preserve the pregnant woman's life, or that continuing the pregnancy would result in the serious risk of a quote, substantial and irreversible impairment of a major bodily function. That's one exception. The other exception is if the fetus has a severe fetal abnormality, which the state law defines as a life-threatening physical condition that is, quote, incompatible with life outside the womb. So pretty narrow. The law has some other features as well about going after doctors, about allowing third-party intervention. So and one can read, and there's been a lot of commentary on it. This Mississippi law was designed with one major jurisprudential purpose, which is to give the Supreme Court a clear opportunity to address the continuing vitality of both Roe versus Wade and Planned Parenthood versus Casey, the two cases from 50 and 30 years ago that established and then reconfirmed the right to an abortion under the US Constitution. So those are squarely on the court's docket. Oral argument has been set for December 1st. So, of course, there's over 100 amicus briefs that have been filed. The county has signed on to one of those. We joined one with 29 other local governments, putting forth sort of our perspective on the matter, and I'll talk about that in a second. But we filed ours a few weeks ago, actually. But anyway, we have our local government amicus brief. As I said, there's over 100, I think more like 130 other amicus briefs. So although the oral argument is on December 1st, I think it's likely that it's going to take the court a little bit of time to work their way through it. This matter has been rolling around on the court's agenda for a significant amount of time. But of course, the greater level of anxiety has arisen in the context of what the Supreme Court did not do with the recent Texas law that allowed basically, I'm sure you've read about it, but it's for everyone's benefit. It's a new Texas law that essentially allows private enforcement of a 6-week abortion ban. The Supreme Court has declined to take any action on that to block that law. to date. So it really does put the fate of Roe versus Wade and Planned Parenthood versus Casey squarely at issue. What did we argue in our amicus brief? Basically, 4 salient points. The first is that specifically, well, actually, let me just stop there. Any questions before I go on to the basic content of our amicus brief?
Supervisor Lee.
Yes, the problematic ruling that you mentioned from the Supreme Court recently from Texas was actually what we call, it was an unsigned opinion by, correct? But apparently there was at least a majority vote on this, correct?
Well, they didn't take it up. They declined to address the petition.
Right, they declined to address the petition, but certainly it wasn't like there was a anybody signing it. Basically, they just let it go. So the lower ruling from Supreme Court held. So that's why now that's still being held. Is that going to be heard eventually, or because it was an emergency appeal type deal, right?
Yeah, and it's one of those things where, given the very, very unusual procedural posture of the Texas law, which again, like this Mississippi law, was designed with a very specific purpose in mind, and that, just to digress for a moment, the Texas law was designed to be not enforceable by any state or local official, which allows one to avoid all of these other sort of major Supreme Court decisions about injunctions. So there are a variety of reasons why different members of the court could have said, we are not going to review this law at this time. So there's many different ways, of course, of reading that. I think I personally am still concerned, but I understand the Biden administration has now filed suit, and frankly, I don't recall the status of that suit, although I have not heard that any injunction has yet issued in wherever that case has been filed.
And the concern of that is that anybody who is performing the abortion services based on the new Texas law would allow any private party, basically anyone, to sue. And that, I think that's a concern, correct? And I believe, is this just civil in nature, or is it civil and criminal?
To be candid, I have not read the full text of the Texas law. Mm-hmm. If I had to guess, I would imagine it has some criminal penalties, or at least opens the door for that. Mm-hmm. But I can look into that and re-present upon that issue at the next task force meeting.
Thank you very much.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so just going back to our amicus brief in the Dobbs case. So we argued essentially four major themes. One is that, and this we believe is a pretty well-established fact, that specifically in the area of reproductive health, that's where one sees the most stark disparities along racial and socioeconomic lines. So in other words, anytime there is going to be some decisions or rulemaking or statutory changes or what have you in the realm of reproductive health, if there's going to be a differential impact along racial and socioeconomic lines. The second point is simply that the court should consider that any such change in the law or change in the jurisprudence that it might be contemplating, that it will not have a uniform effect. Those with means will be able to continue to access healthcare, reproductive healthcare. Those without means, of course, will not have the same type of health equity. So we're asking the court to keep that in the forefront of its mind as it considers this case. Relatedly, what is our interest as local governments signing on to this amicus brief? And one that you are both very well familiar with is that local governments, of course, in particular amongst all governmental entities, we have always played and frankly continue to play a very central role in eliminating racial and economic health disparities. That's what we do, right? That's our public hospital system, our clinics, the many programs that we have, the investments that we've made into our county health and public health system. And so these systems that we have implemented and have been implemented around the nation not only are they important to us in terms of eliminating health disparities, but they're actually effective, especially in the realm of prenatal care, infant mortality, and maternal mortality, that these are programs that actually work. The final point that we make, and this goes to the issue of precedent, that obviously Roe's been around, what, for 50 years, almost 50 years now. Planned Parenthood versus Casey, what is it? I guess approximately 30. That in addition to everyone in the community, local governments have also placed an enormous reliance interest on the continuing vitality of these two landmark Supreme Court cases. And so from a stare decisis or precedential standpoint, the court should also consider that reliance interest, that, for obvious reasons, one should not sort of flip-flop on such important precedent, because it makes it very difficult for, among other things, local governments to plan programs, implement programs, things of that sort, when the rules, if you will, may change back and forth. So that's what we've asked the court to keep in mind. I haven't scoured all the other 130 amicus briefs in this case. I imagine a lot of other angles are being covered, but that's ours.
Mr. Press, understanding that caveat that you have not reviewed the more than 100 amicus briefs, are there one or two other sort of key or core arguments that you're aware of that are being made on this issue? If you were trying to sort of share with someone colloquially what the argument was about, and what other folks were arguing on this point. Are there a couple of points there that you could share with us?
Well, I guess this really comes down to, as you may recall from Justice Kavanaugh's confirmation hearings, he was asked quite a bit about both Roe and Planned Parenthood versus Casey. And he used a term that I thought was kind of interesting. He said that the reproductive health care rights and abortion rights under the US Constitution, that is supported by, as he called it, double precedent. So I think it's going to be, I think, obviously, in addition to reproductive rights, the other major issue here is how is this court going to treat precedent? Because there's many a Supreme Court justice who over the years has mentioned that, they're really essentially voting in the way that they are in the name of stare decisis and precedent, because that is so important. I'm sure they're aware that the US Supreme Court is viewed as a much more political body than it has been in the past. I think even Justice Thomas has opined on that recently. And so this, to me, is quite an inflection point for the US Supreme Court, because on an issue of this importance, I think it's no understatement to say that the fate of the Supreme Court also hangs in the balance, whether it will be viewed as simply a purely political body, whether it will motivate changes from Congress and the president to expand the composition and nature of the court, put limits on life terms, all sorts of things. But that's what happens when a supposedly neutral body is viewed as overtly political. So they're really going to have to decide. And again, I don't know how much some of the briefing gets into this, but from what I've just sort of read more casually, that seems to be one of the big question marks about this case.
Mr. Press, thank you. When conversations about the court and the court's conduct come up, which is not that common in everyday conversation, but I am sometimes obliged to remember or to share the observation with someone that, the test of a sound decision is not whether any one of us individually likes the outcome in the sense that it reflects our views or our values or our politics or our personal belief system, but whether or not it is sound legally. And I gather that's what you're pressing on with this last point, yes?
Yes. And you may, go ahead.
And excuse the interruption, but I don't want to follow this train of thought. And again, understanding that different folks will have different views or values or politics that they bring to their decision making. In theory, and I'm underscoring that phrase, in theory, a small c conservative court should be more bound by precedent than other more activist courts, in theory, yes?
Yes, absolutely. And again, because we are talking about not just did you think that Roe versus Wade was wrongly decided or does not have particularly sound reasoning. I think anyone who's been to law school has been exposed to those arguments. But we all thought, at least back in my day, we all thought that Planned Parenthood versus Casey was sort of an additional buttressing, if you will, of reproductive rights, in the sense that it provided a more expansive foundation for that right. And again, to use Justice Kavanaugh's own words, the right to abortion rights, to reproductive health care rights, it has double precedent now. So that's a very formidable barrier for one to overcome.
And forgive me if I've just been out of touch, but I gather from your comment about that phrase that is not a legal term of art commonly employed, but was just individual characterization by now Justice Kavanaugh, the double precedent reference.
That's correct.
Thank you. Supervisor Lee, thank you for your patience while I explored that topic a little bit more. Any comments or questions from you?
Yes, thank you, Douglas, on this point. I heard that the House has just passed a bill trying to codify Roe v. Wade and is now at the Senate. Do you have any information on that?
I do not. Maybe some of our folks who monitor what's happening in Congress. I will say, though I was a young fella at the time, I have been advised by my law professors that when Roe versus Wade was decided, and this again goes to the notion of a reliance interest, there were many federal laws, or other federal bills, that were sort of in the works that would have codified what has now become Roe versus Wade, or at least the principles of Roe versus Wade. And that because that case was decided in the way it was decided, that it essentially rendered moot the need for such federal legislation. So, again, it wouldn't surprise me if that were certainly one option that Congress was looking at, but I have not scoured those bills yet.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. And Mr. Press, Supervisor Lee and I, of course, know what the board's action in this area has been, but could you just share it with anyone who's in the meeting on the call so that they're aware of the fact that our board has taken action in the matter?
In the sense of approving the filing of the amicus brief?
Yes.
Yes. So just for folks' benefit, before we are involved in any litigation, we have to seek express approval from the board, which we do in order to file an amicus brief, and that's what we've done here.
And just so folks are clear, on a 5-0 vote, our Board of Supervisors has not only authorized, but directed our county counsel's office to weigh in with an amicus brief in support of the position that Mr. Press has just shared. That is to say, in support of continued access to family planning and abortion. All right, that takes us to your next item here, which was the Title IX issues that we had also asked about. And as you will recall, our board has taken action to do an assessment, an audit, if you will, in the county. But this is a significantly, I'll say, dynamic, changing, ever-changing area with respect to Title IX issues, given the change of administrations. What can you tell us about where things stand?
Sure. So again, just to provide a little bit of context for the listening audience, in May of 2020, the Trump administration promulgated amendments to Title IX regulations that very seriously adversely affected investigations and actions, making them much more difficult for survivors to bring and participate in them. And so those were issued in May of 2020, made effective in August of 2020, spawned a number of lawsuits. In July of 2021, a federal district court in Massachusetts found that one provision in particular about certain aspects about how live hearings would or would not be conducted, found that one specific provision to be, quote, arbitrary and capricious, which is a pretty difficult standard to meet, I must say. And then, so issued an injunction invalidating and vacating at least that part of the Trump administration amended rule. And then also subsequent to its initial hearing, then held that order would be applicable nationwide. And that was in a case called Victim Rights Law Center versus Cordona. But then, as you also may recall, that was in July of 2021. But earlier on, soon after the Biden administration came into office, in April, the Biden administration issued a letter noting that it was undertaking a, quote, comprehensive review of the Department of Education's existing Title IX regulations, orders, guidance, policies, and other similar agency actions to fulfill the policy set forth in President Biden's March 8th executive order, which, for folks who don't remember, that March 8th executive order was entitled Guaranteeing an Educational Environment Free from Discrimination on the basis of sex, including sexual orientation and gender identity. So in essence, the Biden administration fairly early on was signaling that it was going to revisit the Trump era amendments to the Title IX regulations. We just heard recently, just a few weeks ago, well, maybe a month and a half ago, on August 24th of 2021, from the US Department of Education's Office of Civil Rights, that two things. One is that they confirmed that based upon the federal district court decision from Massachusetts, that they will not be enforcing that particular provision that was enjoined. Not a particularly controversial point, but more salient, that the Office of Civil Rights from the US Department of Education, quote, anticipates publishing a notice of proposed rulemaking to amend the department's Title IX regulations, unquote, relatively soon. I don't think we've seen that just yet, but that should be coming. And so we'll have to check, but I believe we probably already have board authority to weigh in and comment on those new proposed rules once the notice of proposed rulemaking is issued. So we will take it up at that point. As you may recall, and just for the listeners' sake, we did, as a county, weigh in on and comment on the rules that were ultimately amended by the Trump administration. Obviously, our comments didn't carry the day, but we hope that they will be taken more seriously this time around.
Thank you very much. Questions from Supervisor Lee or comments, if any? None. And then, Mr. Press, I know you wanted to give us an update on, was it the Daca issues in particular?
Yes. So in terms of speaking of forthcoming rulemaking and county commentary on that, the Department of Homeland Security issued a note that they have issued a proposed rule on Daca on September 28th, with the aim to, quote, preserve and fortify the deferred action for childhood arrivals policy, unquote, and that they will be opening a 60-day public comment period, during which I believe we will be submitting comments as well.
Thank you. I have only one closing comment as we wrap this item up, but I'll go to Supervisor Lee first to see if he has questions or comments.
Sure. Yes, thank you. It looks like there was a rescission of the Daca when the court in July basically ruled in favor of those states, saying that Daca is in violation. The court vacated the program and joined DHS from approving any new Daca applications. Is that correct?
Yeah, so it basically said that the sort of the curtailment of the DACA program was that the curtailment from a political standpoint that was really not going to work, that some of the restrictions were still in effect. I have to confess, I haven't studied that case very closely, but from what I understand, that's part of what I think is motivating the need to go forward with rulemaking, and with also the Biden administration prodding Congress to come up with a final statutory solution. Looks like someone has raised their hand, so maybe they can speak.
Thank you. I am going to turn to Danielle Christian. Ms. Christian, do you have a comment at this point in the proceedings?
Thank you, Chairperson Simitian. I actually wanted to circle back to the bill related to reproductive health that Supervisor Lee asked about, and just very quickly share with you that it's the Women's Health Protection Act. The House did pass its bill in mid-September, which was HR 3755, and it would create new legal protection for providers to provide abortion care and their patients to receive care free from medically unnecessary restrictions and bans on abortion. The Senate does have the same bill on its side. It's Senate Bill 1975. I would also like to share that all the members of our House delegation co-sponsored the House bill, and our 2 state senators are co-sponsors of the Senate bill. Its prognosis in the Senate, I don't know. I don't think super great, but perhaps one of the other lobbyists could comment on that when their time comes up for their reports. So I just wanted to close the loop on that. Thank you very much.
Thank
and
you.
Just to confirm, when you say the prognosis is not good, is because not only you need 50 majority, but you actually need 60 votes to pass this bill. Is that correct?
That's my interpretation, but we have people who work in the industry who are much more subject matters than I who could speak to that.
We'll give the folks at Prime Policy a heads up that question is coming in terms of legislative prospects in that case.
Great. And then the other question I have is going back to the rescission of DACA. It sounded like after the court's ruling in July 2021, the current Biden administration is appealing that ruling from the court. Have we joined in to do amicus curiae on that appeal?
I don't recall that we have. Let me look into that.
Yeah, if you could confirm, let us know, because I have a
Yep.
feeling that this board will be interested if we brought it up.
Sure.
Thank you.
Agreed. Thank you. Thank you, Supervisor Lee. Thank you, Mr. Press. And I'll give just one closing observation, which may be a statement of the obvious, but I think it bears repeating. And Mr. Press, thank you. You always do a nice job for us in laying out these issues. I worry sometimes that as we have these conversations, they are, because you are a legal counsel, somewhat legalistic in nature. The cases are often complex. The status of rulemaking is even more remote, I think. But I think it is important, and I know our entire board knows this, to underscore that the issues we're talking about and the decisions that will be made have a real impact on a great many residents of Santa Clara County, whether it's family planning and abortion, whether it's immigration issues, whether it's the Title IX issues that affect so many of the students here at our colleges and universities, but also at the K through 12 level. There are real human impacts and consequences, and that's why we have these seemingly obscure conversations sometimes about just where things stand moment to moment. So thank you again. Anything else, Mr. Press?
Yeah,
please.
Just on that point, we do make this commentary in our amicus brief in the Dobbs case. And it's one that I think it really kind of brings this home to every single person who's listening. And that is that given how long Roe has been with us, nearly every single woman of childbearing age has lived during the Roe versus Wade era. So this would be, if there were any real damage done to Roe and to abortion and reproductive rights in this country, it would be something that every single woman of reproductive age in this country would have never experienced before. And that, I'm hoping, is also a significant reliance interest that the court will consider.
Thank you for that. All right, then, without objection and hearing none, we will consider the report received. But before we do that, Supervisor Lee, let me just confirm with the clerk, not aware that we have anyone who is in queue to speak on this item.
We have no speakers on this item, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Leon. Then what we'll do is say the report is deemed received without objection. All right, that takes us then to item number 7, which is the report from the Office of the County Executive in connection with the resettlement of refugees from Afghanistan here in Santa Clara County.
Thank you, Chairperson Simidian. I'm going to ask Zelica Rodriguez-Deems, who is the manager of the Office of Immigrant Relations, to provide this report to the task force. Thank you.
Thank you.
Here I am. Can you see my slides? Just want to confirm. Awesome.
Yes.
Thank you. So really high level overview, wanting to make sure that we are getting the most updated information, because I know there has been a special interest from our board on the Afghani resettlement. We know that in April 2021, President Biden announced the end of military presence in Afghanistan. This has led to subsequent mass evacuations of families in Afghanistan. What it means for Santa Clara County specifically, we know nationwide there's about 65,000 people who are going to be coming into the United States. That for California, that's about 5,200. Santa Clara County is one of 8 counties that are going to be receiving most numbers, and so currently we have about 245 slated to come this fiscal year, in comparison to about 50 that were resettled in the county last year. So the increase is significant.
Could we go back to the last slide, please? I apologize for the interruption.
Yeah.
Forgive me, but there's an asterisk on our Santa Clara County numbers indicating who is not included. Could you tell us a little bit more about who is not included, please? And apologies again for the interruption.
No, of course. And so on the next slide is where I do go into a little bit more detail. That does only include, so this number does only include humanitarian parolees. This is a more of a unique immigration status that has been specifically expanded for Afghan refugees. But we know that there are 2 other statuses under which Afghan refugees will be entering the country. So refugees and then also special immigrant visas. There is a lot of backlog. There are very different qualifications to be able to apply for these visas. And so the 245 right now is a very conservative number, I'd say, but we do know that there are about, and I'm trying to rack my brain, but there is a significant amount of people obviously still waiting in Afghanistan to enter the country under refugee and then also special immigrant visa status. To reiterate, these are the 3 that are being used. Humanitarian parole is specifically interesting because it's unique and just expanded for this for this urgent situation. Right now, Santa Clara County does have 2 verified, certified resettlement agencies that we work with. It's the Jewish Family Services and also the International Rescue Committee. They provide a range of services from employment to legal services to finding housing, getting children enrolled in school. There are, looking at expanded case management, also just beyond the emergency services, up until 90 days to get people into a permanent job and into a permanent home. This doesn't take away from other kind of periphery organizations that are also supporting these families, you know, providing mental health, providing immigration services. And then also as a county, we do have a health assessment that we oversee to make sure that these families are also getting linked and referred to immediate health services. There's a lot happening statewide and nationally. A lot of that is still very much in the proposal stage. We know that there have been significant funds that have been proposed at the nationwide. I think President Biden, a week after the announced evacuations, he proposed about $6.3 billion in support. Statewide, Governor Newsom did propose over 16 million. Like I said, these are still very much in proposal stages. We do know that some funding will come through, and then when that happens, both as a county and as a state, we will be able to apply and get potentially reimbursed for some of these expanded services that we are supporting. I said this. We, as an office and as a county, we have also been meeting with both of our resettlement agencies and also different organizations to really figure out where we are providing, you know, where we're really strong in the services that we're providing, but also really identifying those gaps and thinking about strategies around how to support those gaps. One key example of that is that we know whether people are coming in through refugee status, immigration visa status, or refugee status, that people will have to apply for asylum. They have about a year to apply for asylum once they're in this country. And so that does trigger, again, a much longer immigration process once people are here. That is my very brief overview of a very complicated situation happening in Afghanistan. So please, if there are any questions.
Thank you very much. Let me first check with the clerk, see if we have any speakers on this item.
We have no speakers on this item, sir.
Thank you. Then going back to our task force members, Supervisor Lee, I have just a comment in a moment. The one question I had was answered, and in fact, as Rodriguez deems, you anticipated my question. If only I'd been a little more patient for your next slide. So thank you for that. Supervisor Lee.
First, let me apologize. My internet got disconnected for a couple of minutes, so I certainly was not able to hear all the discussion, but I certainly did have the slides to look at. I'll certainly have probably more questions to ask. At the former board meeting, if I remember, when we approved the funds to help the impending arrival of our Afghan refugee, I've asked to see if what other type of services are being provided by some of our neighboring jurisdictions, and try to see how we could compare to what we are doing here locally. So Zelica, by looking at the other, like Fremont, Alameda County, and other Bay Area jurisdiction, do you see that there's anything that they are doing that we're not doing right now?
That's an excellent question. We have been actually meeting with several other counties and then also cities, and looking nationally to see if there's anything else that we maybe aren't thinking of. I will be honest, Santa Clara County is doing the most right now around designating emergency funds and really thinking about expanding services, but also expanding case management services through these 2 resettlement offices. In other counties, there is still very much a grassroots fundraising campaign. I think there hasn't been a lot of county dedicated funds going to the resettlement offices, but definitely supporting in fundraising. And that those efforts have been going well. But like I mentioned before with Chairperson Samidian's question, it's hard to know what the numbers will actually be, because there are so many people still trying to evacuate, and there's a lot of people also stuck in military bases, as you know. So there, you know, we know that there is approximate numbers, but we don't know what this is actually going to look like. And frankly, Santa Clara County is leading the way in supporting these families.
Right, thank you. And in terms of resettlement of those numbers that you have identified that'll be coming this fiscal year, how many of them has actually arrived at this point of the 245?
That's a good question. I would actually check in with the refugee resettlement offices to give you an updated number.
Okay, very good. Thank you very much.
Thank
That's
you.
all I have.
And thank you, Supervisor Lee. And the only thing I wanted to add was Ms. Rodriguez-Deems, and let me just check that our county executive, Dr. Smith, is still with us.
Yes, I'm here, having trouble
Thank
with
you.
my technology.
No problem, Dr. Smith. Sorry to put you through the paces here on the technology front. But the reason I asked specifically is one of the things that these conversations at the task force level allow us to do is to address more fully issues that may have been touched on only briefly at board meetings. And what I wanted to communicate, and I think Supervisor Lee commented in a similar vein at the prior board meeting. I feel strongly that one of the lessons that we learn every day here at the county is that we can do more if we do it with others. So as the report indicates, lots of partners who have indispensable roles to play in doing what we are trying to do for and with these refugees. And the need will be great and beyond the capacity of any one organization, certainly including our county. So I really do applaud the sort of larger view, Ms. Rodriguez-Deems, that you're taking and describing. But this is the part where I wanted to take advantage of this opportunity to communicate as one of 5 board members that my values as a board member are very clearly inclined to say this is a responsibility that we want to step up to and embrace and do our very level best and as much as we possibly can. I believe that those values are consistent with the residents of my district. I believe that those values are consistent with the residents of our county. And I believe that those values are consistent with what we would commonly describe as American values. So, as you go about your work and as you are asking yourself, what are the priorities of your board? I just sort of want to underscore that I think this kind of refugee relief and resettlement effort is consistent with the values that of our county and our country, and certainly of individual board members who have spoken to it. The last thing I will say on this subject, and then I go back to Supervisor Lee, who I see has his hand raised, is I think this is not only the humane thing to do, but I think it is the smart and right thing to do as well from the standpoint of our place in the global geopolitical arena. Regrettably, this is not the first or last time we are facing consequences like this in the aftermath of U.S. engagement abroad. And if we hope, expect, want folks abroad to be our partners in international affairs, then we need to communicate, not just in word, but in deed, that we will be there when the time comes to do the right thing. So as I say, I think it's not just the humane thing to do, it is the smart thing to do. And I appreciate your patience with this extended comment, but as I say, I wanted we haven't had to face something like this for a while, and I wanted the staff to understand where board members are coming from. Can't speak for others, but I can at least speak as one of 5 members. Supervisor Lee, thank you for your patience, sir. Over to you.
Thank you, Chair Committee. Zelka, the follow-up question I have is as follows. We know that there are two main agencies doing and the Afghan refugees. Is staff also helping to convene other agencies so they are on the same page so that they're actually supporting each other on other areas?
You cut out a little bit, Vice Chair, but your question was, are we supporting to convene other kind of organizations to really think through more of a wraparound, maybe wraparound supports for families? Is that kind of
Exactly,
okay?
right, to make sure the wraparound that they all working with each other. Yeah, correct.
Yes, absolutely. So
that's happening, right? Yeah.
Yes, so absolutely. So OIR does actually monitor contracts for different legal service providers, and have been in partnership with the ACIs of the world. And so we have also really looked at what are all the different services that these families are going to need, from schools to health to mental health to knowing your rights, right? There's all of these different pieces. And so, yes, we have been starting to have meetings with different organizations to really think through how do we create more of a wraparound, no wrong door approach to make sure that these families really get their needs met and are successful in resettling in this country.
Great. Zelka, the PowerPoint, I'm sorry, I did not get a copy of that you just presented. Is it possible for you to send us a copy of that,
Yes,
please?
of course.
Okay, thank you. And I think that's all the questions I have. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Supervisor Lee. Thank you, Ms. Rodriguez-Deems. Let me just ask that the clerk note that without objection and hearing none, we will deem the report received. And thank you again for the good work. All right, that takes us then to item number 8, which is to receive the report from Prime Policy Group, which is our key partner in terms of federal legislative, regulatory, and administrative advocacy. So why don't we turn to Ms. Christian to sort of lead us through that conversation. Ms. Christian?
Thank you, Chairperson Simidian. We have the full team from Prime Policy Group with us today. That includes Aaron Dorton, Rich Mead, Marty Panoni, excuse me, Marty, and Akila Powell. And we're going to start with some information from Rich Mead, the dynamics of what's going on, the current status of the infrastructure bill. He'll talk a little bit about the debt limit, and then Aaron will follow up with a little bit more specificity on what the county interests are inside of the various pieces of legislation that are being considered. So with that, I'd like to ask Rich Mead to take over.
Thank you.
Thank you. It's my pleasure to be with you this morning. And what I thought I'd do is give you an overview of what's dominating the conversation in Washington at a high level. Then I'm going to talk about the continuing resolution, or CR, that was recently signed into law and has a few provisions that the county may be interested in. I will then turn it over to my partner, Aaron, who will talk you through the president's Build Back Better agenda and some priorities of the county that are in the mix with that legislation. And finally, she'll give you an update on the implementation of the American Rescue Plan. The president's agenda is shaped by two pieces of legislation: the Bipartisan Infrastructure Framework, or the BIF. We love to give acronyms and names to things in Washington. So there's BIF, number one, and then the Build Back Better Budget Reconciliation Bill. And I won't say the president's agenda is in trouble, but there have been some troubling developments within the last couple of weeks where we've seen some infighting within the Democratic caucuses on Capitol Hill. And at the time when the Senate passed the BIF on a strong bipartisan vote, it also passed a budget resolution that set in motion the budget reconciliation process to put together a $3.5 trillion bill to fund a number of the president's priorities, including expanding Medicare benefits to include dental, vision, and hearing benefits, free universal pre-K education, free community college education, and paid and family medical leave, to name a few. And at the time when the infrastructure bill and the budget resolution were pending before the Senate Majority Leader Schumer told his progressives that they should vote for the infrastructure bill or there won't be a budget reconciliation bill. and similarly told his moderates to vote for the budget resolution or there won't be an infrastructure bill. On the House side, there are also moderate members led by our former colleague and friend, Congressman Josh Gottheimer from New Jersey, who were reluctant to vote for a budget resolution that set up such a large reconciliation bill. So Josh cut a deal with the speaker that she would call up for vote the Senate passed BIF, the infrastructure bill, no later than September 27th. And by doing so, he and the other moderates then voted for the budget resolution to set up the budget reconciliation process. Last week, we saw the House move that deadline back from the 27th to 29th. And ultimately, the House did not vote on the infrastructure bill. And that's because the progressives asserted their sort of authority, if you will, and said, hold on, we don't want to let this infrastructure bill go unless we have a firmer commitment that reconciliation will also go. So we want to see the reconciliation bill passed by the Senate before we want to pass and send to the president this infrastructure bill. While the House committees met their September 15th deadline to report the reconciliation instructions to the House Budget Committee, what came out of those committees in total, though, does not have the votes to pass the House because of the concerns of the moderates. The President Biden went to Capitol Hill last Friday, and some say he sided with the progressives, but nevertheless, he told the Democratic caucus, don't worry about these deadlines of September 27th, 29th. Don't worry about deadlines for passing any bill, but just try to get both bills done as quickly as you can. And further complicating matters is you have at least two moderate Democratic senators, Senators Manchin from West Virginia and Sinema from Arizona, who are saying what came out of the House committees is too big. And they also want many of the new benefits being created by those bills or that bill to be means tested or income capped to only target the assistance to the most needy in the country. And in fact, to further complicate matters, Senator Manchin produced a document that he and Senator Schumer signed this summer saying that the reconciliation package could not be bigger than 1.5 trillion and had a number of other requirements that went along with that hard number on the 1.5. And in fact, just today, Senator Manchin reiterated to the press, he's not moving from the 1.5 trillion figure. Senate progressives are fuming because at that $1.5 trillion figure, because they saying they already compromised to get to 3.5 trillion. They really wanted between 6 and 8 trillion new spending, and they thought the 3.5 trillion was the quote-unquote compromise. So we're seeing a lot of tensions between the progressive and moderate wings of the Democratic Party. And we saw recently Senator Sinema was chased into the restroom at Arizona State University by progressive activists. And that kind of intimidation is not helping to bring these sides together, unfortunately. So I think that, to the extent there are divisions amongst the Democratic Party, I think there's also a sense that the Democratic Party wants to deliver the president's agenda. So I do think that they will be able to work out these bills, but it's going to take some time. And so while we're sort of racing towards that September 27th, then 29th deadline, since we've missed that, my impression is there's not as much urgency there was even a week ago, but nevertheless, they're still trying to work this out. And they're still trying to figure out where the common ground is. And I think that this is going to take weeks, if not possibly months, to get the resolution and work out the differences amongst the moderates and the progressives. Because like I said, there's disagreement on the top line, but there's also disagreement underneath. For example, some moderates have expressed concern about the drug pricing provisions that are in this bill, and there may be some controversy around that. For example, going beneath the surface of the top line. Hanging over all of this is the need to raise our national debt limit. We had previously, by law, had set a calendar deadline for our country's borrowing authority of July 31st, and we've since moved past that. The Treasury Department can use what we call extraordinary measures to continue to fund the operations of the government. but those measures are beginning to run out, and the Treasury has said that they only have until October 18th to use those measures. The Congressional Budget Office has suggested it may be more towards the end of October or even possibly into November, but nevertheless, we're running out of time to do that. Senator Mitch McConnell, who's the minority leader, has said that the Democrats have to pass a debt limit extension on their own. And he and all the Republicans are united in their opposition for them to vote to raise the debt limit. And so this they've already moved once to try to move and turn to the debt limit, which they couldn't get the 60 votes to overcome the filibuster. And they're voting again today, and they're not going to get the 60 votes again today. Senator McConnell has been insisting that the Democrats use the budget reconciliation process to raise the debt limit. And the Democrats do not want to use reconciliation, in part because if they use the budget reconciliation process, they won't be able to use a date for lifting the debt limit, but rather have to use a specific dollar amount. And just to pause on that point, there's two ways you can raise the debt limit. One of which is to raise a specific dollar amount in the statute to say we can borrow up to X amount. And the other is to say you can suspend the debt limit until a date certain. And I think the Democrats' preference is to use a date certain rather than a dollar amount for a number of reasons. One of which is the dollar amount is tricky. You don't always know how long that will last. And so you don't really know when this issue will come up again. Number one. Number two, I think there's some thinking that having Democratic members having to vote on a specific dollar amount may succumb them to attacks about, you voted to raise our national debt by whatever $1 trillion. And so there's some political concerns there. And so we're at a little bit of a standoff over the debt ceiling. The Republicans have said if the Democrats do proceed with budget reconciliation, that they will not make that process difficult. They will yield back time, and they will try to make that go as quickly, as smoothly as possible as a small concession to the Democrats. The good news is that both sides did come together to pass a continuing resolution, or CR, to keep the federal government open until December 3rd. The CR did include two provisions that may be of some interest to the county. First, it included $6.3 billion to aid in the resettlement of the Afghanistan citizens in the United States. And there's funding that was included to process citizens who were evacuated to our military bases overseas. There's also aid for citizens who still are in country that want to come to the US. There's also funds for a path to legal permanent residence and assistance to transition to a new life in our country, with assistance for health screenings, vaccinations, health coverage, and employment assistance. The other provision that may be of some interest to the county is there's $28.6 billion in funds for disaster relief to help with areas affected by wildfires and crop damage and damage from other natural disasters. Let me just close with the comment about, there's a question earlier about the Roe versus Wade legislation, and Ms. Christian pointed out that did pass the House and is pending in the Senate. The thinking is that there's probably not an ability to get to 60 votes in the Senate. However, two Republican female senators, Senators Murkowski and Collins, are working on I think they're trying to put together a bipartisan bill to codify Roe versus Wade. I don't know. I think they'll be successful in putting together a bill. I don't know if they'll be successful in figuring out how to get to the 60 votes, but nevertheless, they're trying to work out maybe some kind of compromise on that issue. So with that, let me turn to my partner, Aaron.
Thanks so much, Rich. So in keeping with the county's specific interests, I thought I would start by highlighting just a few noteworthy items from not only the Build Back Better Act, but I've also added a few from the bipartisan infrastructure bill. As my colleague indicated, the Build Back Better Act is a package worth currently as much as $3.5 trillion. The measure forms the bulk of the president's agenda and funds a broad expansion of social programs, including childcare, elder care, and paid family leave. As we've heard, congressional moderates are balking at the cost, and they want to vote on the bipartisan infrastructure bill first. Senator Manchin, as we've also seen, outlined his parameters earlier this summer in a private meeting with the Senate Majority Leader. Some of those points have since come to light, besides the $1.5 trillion top line number. He's also required that no disbursements be made until all of the COVID legislative funding and American Rescue Plan funding has been spent. I note this because the county I know has been interested in Treasury's final rule on ARPA state and local relief guidelines. I'll give an update on this at the end of my report. But with respect to the bigger bill, some highlights of the Build Back Better Act that are noteworthy for the county and in play right now as negotiations progress are: for workers and families, the bill expands workplace support by providing 12 weeks of universal paid family and medical leave for all U.S. workers, provides funding for affordable childcare, including support for providers, and universal pre-K for 3 and 4-year-olds. It expands child nutrition programs, such as expanded eligibility and paperwork elimination for school meals, as well as nationwide summer EBT programs. The bill also has climate provisions, such as a new clean energy electricity performance program, which is a grant program to electricity suppliers, and money for a zero emissions vehicle infrastructure build out. Additionally, the Enhanced Affordable Housing Access Program provides $10 billion to support access to affordable housing and enhance mobility for low-income individuals and residents of disadvantaged or persistent poverty communities. On the transportation front, there is $6 billion for local transportation priorities, which is essentially the earmarks that were stripped out of the surface transportation program during the bipartisan infrastructure negotiations, and I know the county would benefit from several if enacted. On the tax versus the spend side of the bill, there is a 1-year extension and modification of the child tax credit, including advance payment for 2022, as well as establishment of a monthly child tax credit with advance payment through 2025, and an increase on tax in certain tobacco products. As I said, I thought a few items of the bipartisan infrastructure bill are also worth noting for the county. The bill, which would increase spending by $550 billion over 5 years, and would extend highway safety, transit, rail, pipeline, and research programs that are typically included in a 5-year transportation reauthorization. But in addition to those programs, however, the bill includes some other provisions which are especially noteworthy for the county, such as provisions to address climate change, codify parts of a Trump-era policy on environmental reviews, authorize programs to enhance the electric grid and replace lead pipes, to name a few. It also makes grants to states for broadband deployment, creates a new competitive grant program for broadband, establishes a new state and local cybersecurity grant program, and requires the Department of Transportation to create a cybersecurity tool for state and local public transportation authorities. Additionally, it expands energy efficiency and conservation block grant eligibilities and includes charging and fueling infrastructure grants, as well as a carbon reduction formula program. Before I wrap up, I have 2 more items to mention with respect to county interests. As I noted earlier, I want to give a brief mention of the status of the American Rescue Plan state and local fiscal recovery funds. As a result of the feedback and comments gathered from recipients during the interim final rule commenting process, Treasury is revising the deadline for the submission of the first project and expenditure report for the state and local fiscal recovery fund grant. For states and territories, the report will now be due on January 31st, 2022, and will cover the period between the award date and December 31st, 2021. This is a change from the previously communicated October 31st, 2021 due date for the project and expenditure report. As I understand it, further instructions will be provided at a later date, including updates to existing guidance. Lastly, one more item of note. In a previous task force meeting, we discussed the COVID-19 Hate Crimes Act. In mid-July, the House Commerce Justice State Appropriations Bill for FY22 passed out of committee and contained $30 million to expand provisions of the COVID-19 Hate Crimes Act. The money, which is allocated under a new grant program called Community-Based Approaches to Advancing Justice, would be provided directly to community-based organizations to implement the COVID-19 Hate Crimes Act's goal of community engagement, empowerment, and education. One of the major provisions in the new hate crimes law directs federal agencies to work with community-based organizations to raise awareness of hate crimes during the COVID-19 crisis. So that's all I have for today. I can certainly follow up in depth on any of the provisions I mentioned if you need or require more information. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Dordina. Thank you, Mr. Mead. Let me ask that we pause here for what I'll call a little catch up with questions or comments, mindful of the time. Let me just ask, I got, I had a little trouble tracking where things stand with what we used to call earmarks, and forgive me, Ms. Dorton, are now called what again? I know we have a new, more embraceable phrase.
Which is also escaping me as well. What I'm sure one of my colleagues is aware of it.
It's they're community-based projects.
There we go. Community-based projects, which sound much better than earmarks, I'm sure.
Right.
And where are those pending funding allocations in this process? There was reference to it, but I had trouble tracking.
That was in the, someone jump in if I keep it rolling right off your tongue. I believe it's in the Build Back Better Act, and it was stripped out. And again, my colleagues can feel free to correct me if I'm wrong. It was out in the bipartisan infrastructure bill negotiations.
So, Mr. Mead, I think you referenced this earlier, and I probably should have jumped in at the time, but what was it you were trying to tell us about where the these community-based projects are now?
Yes, so and not to make things more confusing, but they are. The House passed this summer a surface transportation bill separate and aside from the bipartisan infrastructure bill. And within that surface transportation bill, that included earmarks. And what the House Transportation and Infrastructure Committee did was, because that bill did not get married with the bipartisan infrastructure bill, but nevertheless passed the House with earmarks, they included a provision in the Build Back Better bill, the reconciliation bill, that sends $6 billion to the Department of Transportation. And by the way, they had about $6 billion of earmarks in their surface transportation bill. And they sent it to the Secretary of Transportation and said, here's some money to fund community-based projects. Now, the reconciliation bill can't include the actual earmarks in it, but the thinking is that if this money gets through the Build Back Better bill, it'll be parked at the Department of Transportation, and then either through subsequent legislation or report language or a letter to the Secretary or some other way, Congress will then inform the Department of Transportation where to send those monies. And there were some projects that were in the surface transportation budget that had an impact on Santa Clara County.
Mr. Mead, excuse me, but you know, there were, of course, community-based projects, earmarks that were not transportation related. Did they also get attached to or incorporated in the surface transportation funding, or are they parked somewhere else for the moment?
So, go ahead. I'll let Ms. Christian answer that one.
Ms. Christian, I'm thinking, for example, of the $1 million allocation that Representative Rokana sought out on behalf of the county to expand our community health workers in the Asian American community.
Yes, that's I figured that's where you were going on your question. And Prime Policy Group, please correct me if I'm wrong, but my recollection is that funding for that project was included in the labor HHS appropriations bill that the House passed. I'm not as familiar as where the status is on the Senate side, the Senate equivalent of that appropriations bill, but my recollection is that it looked good to be included in whatever final appropriation is passed by Congress. And I see Tom Pike's hand is now up, so he probably has better intel than I on the issue.
Thank you, Mr. Pike. I was just about to call on you, and you anticipated that. For those on the call who don't know Mr. Pike, of course, is the district director for Congressman Khanna. What can you and would you like to share, Mr. Pike?
Well, the CPF funding items are still alive. At least that I believe all of the 10 that we had proposed. So that includes the ones that the congressman has worked on with both you and Supervisor Lee. And I did just confirm with our legislative director that those are alive. The infrastructure proposals are the ones that did not make it to BIF. And so the latest I have is still hopeful that the community project funding proposals will be included at the end of the year omnibus funding bill. So they're still in process, but they're alive.
So and help me here. So we have the infrastructure bill, we have Build Back Better, we have debt ceiling issues, we have continuing resolution issues, but now it's an end of year omnibus bill that we're looking at that would be relevant in terms of the funding and programs that Supervisor Lee and I have been talking with you about.
Right. The community project funding, formerly known as earmarks.
Got it. Thank you for that. And then Mr. Mead and Ms. Dorton, before I go to Supervisor Lee, just a couple more quick questions. The answers may not be quick, but the popular press has done, I think, a fairly good job of covering in minute detail the back and forth around the infrastructure bill and the Build Back Better reconciliation conversations. Less clear is the relationship between debts, at least to me, is debt ceiling and the continuing resolution. First question is just a technical one. Mr. Mead, did I understand you correctly to say that theoretically we were at a legal limit on January 31st, 2021, I guess not theoretically, but as a matter of law, but that there are essentially extraordinary measures that can be taken to move past that date? And then could you clarify the relationship between debt ceiling and continuing resolution?
Yes, absolutely. The debt limit relief expired on July 31st, 2021. And so now the Treasury is basically borrowing money out of trust funds and other accounts that they can access and pull some money out of. Those monies are supposed to be reserved for dedicated purposes, but they're using them now just to fund our operations. And the connection between the CR and the debt limit was when the House wrote the first version of the CR, it included the debt limit in it. And that version of CR was not able to get through the Senate. And so they pulled out the debt limit from that and passed what we called a so-called clean CR from the Senate and then back through the House.
And that clean CR provides what again, please?
It provides funding for the federal government until December 3rd.
December 3rd. Okay. Thank you for that. And I'll go now to my colleague, Supervisor Lee.
Thank you, Chair. The debt ceiling is now our next biggest hurdle, as many is very worried about the providing Republican participation. This October 18th or end of October date might come and go, and then of course that will threaten our credit rating. You know, we've never defaulted on our U.S. Treasury, so I could see that there's no. It's almost like chicken, right? That they're playing until the last minute, see who blinks first. So my question is, has there already been movements on the Democratic side to try to pass this on their own? Because the Republican clearly is saying they're not budgeting. And the Democrats are saying that, well, to pass it, the process is much more difficult through the reconciliation process. It takes 2 weeks. And then, well, right now we're already on the 6th, right? So 2 weeks plus the 6th is past the 20th. So has the Democrat really started that process, or still trying to get a Republican to play?
So a couple things to comment on there. I think that the Democratic senators are saying, we will pass this bill on our own, but allow us to turn to it and invoke cloture is what the term is, to get in. Cloture is the 60 vote threshold. Please allow us to proceed this bill, and we're fine passing this bill on our own. And the Republicans are insisting upon them using the budget reconciliation process. They've not yet initiated that process, but what the Republicans are saying is we will, the 2-week time frame, I think, sort of envision that it would take 3 days to get out of committee, and that they'd use up all the time, and there'd be lengthy vote-a-ramas. And the Republicans are saying is we will allow you to turn to that reconciliation bill quickly. We're not going to insist upon the 3 days. We'll let it come out of committee right away. We'll yield back, our all or most of our time on the floor debate. So we think you could get to it in less than the 2 weeks and do it, but they've not yet turned down that path as of this afternoon.
It's just a concern that we're waiting down the clock the way it is, it's the risk is being threatened is just too great, right? The full faith and credit of the United States is basically on the line when we talk about this issue. So I'm just voicing my own dismay and concern that obviously I have nothing to do with whether they'll start working on it, but the threat of which I think is scary enough that that could affect the stock market and everything else in the world. So it's unfortunate that these folks are not playing as adults, in my opinion, because raising debt ceiling is something that's basically routine. And I personally have opinions that why it really needs to be voted upon every time. And that's something maybe a constitutional amendment need to change it. But in the meantime, I'm extremely concerned that could affect so many aspects because of too many people playing with fire, that this thing might actually burn. So that's my number one concern. It's good that they were able to kick the can down the road regarding the October 1st deadline, right? So that's now December 3rd, but even that's the case, I mean, December 3rd would come sooner than we expected. So we'll see how much games is being played in DC. Now let's looking more toward the money coming to Santa Clara County per se. So the 6.3 billion is passed to aid Afghan refugees. How much of that do you think will be coming to us in the county?
It's hard to put a dollar amount on that. I think that the Afghan citizens will be able to benefit from those monies, but I don't know whether they'll flow through the county or directly to the Afghanistan citizens.
Oh, I see. So this might not come through our county. It actually might be direct payment to the refugees themselves, you think?
Yes. Yes.
Okay. All right. So just keep us posted. Obviously, we'd like to know. Our county has made a move to approve 750K 3 weeks ago on this issue. So I'm looking for it a couple of weeks ago. So I want to make sure that we're jiving in terms of what we're doing and what the federal government is fighting for us as well. In the big Build Back Better, the so-called 3.5 trillion, as mentioned earlier, Senator mentioned is saying that he's not raising a penny over 1.5 trillion. So the negotiation still continues. One item I just wanted to mention is that it talks about the universal pre-K to 3 and 4 year olds. So we're basically saying that instead of K through 12, which is what we're paying for everybody, we are extending 2 years, right? Not just the pre-K 1 year, but actually 2 years of pre-K. Is that correct?
That's correct. And in fact, and if you couple that with the free community college, it's actually more like a 4 year. So it's, from age 3 to about, age 20.
Right. Yep. Thank you. No, that's truly exciting to hear that the proposal. And we'll see if that will make it through at the end of the day. But thank you very much for a very comprehensive report.
All right. Thank you very much, Supervisor Lee. Anything else from the folks at Prime that they want to share with us today?
I don't think so at this time.
All right, then I will say thank you. I'll confirm with our clerk that we have no other folks in the queue for comment by members of the public on this item.
We have no speakers, sir.
Thank you. Then we'll say thank you again to all who participated and helped. And We will, without objection and hearing none, consider the verbal report, oral report received from our administration and the folks at Prime on item number 8, which takes us to item number 9, the last item on our regular agenda. And that, of course, is to deal with issues relating to healthcare policy. And Ms. Christian, who's going to start us off on this one?
Chairperson Simidian, we have Bert Margolin from the Margolin Group who's going to provide a verbal report. And I'd also like to point out that he and his team provided a written report that is a part of your package, which very high level outlines the healthcare provisions in the Build Back Better plan. So
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Mr. Margolin.
Yes, thank you very much. So let me begin by reviewing some of the key healthcare components of this massive reconciliation package. And when I say massive, I know there's a focus on how the 3.5 trillion may be pushed down into the twos. And even if it is pushed down, which is likely to 2.5 trillion or 2.8 or 2.2, it will still be a massive package with a number of provisions that, if they were passed as standalone bills in a normal year, would by themselves be viewed as historic accomplishments. And the fact that they're now bundled together is really what's so remarkable about this endeavor. So healthcare provisions. There are two key provisions in the bill that are designed to strengthen the Affordable Care Act and the Medicaid program. And they're top priorities for the House Democratic leadership. There are some divisions among Senate members and House members as to what should be prioritized, and I'll talk more about that. But the House leadership in particular wants to see the Affordable Care Act strengthened and Medicaid expansion enhanced. So the way they've done that is they take the Affordable Care Act enhanced subsidies, premium subsidies that were passed in the American Rescue Plan. They were passed for a time-limited period, and the House version of this proposal would make those permanent. This is a way of going beyond the 400% of poverty cap that used to exist to give a broader swath of the population, more people access to these premium subsidies. And again, top priority for the House leadership is to make that permanent. There's also an effort, second piece of this, to tackle what's called the Medicaid Coverage Gap, which is a focus on the 12 states that did not expand the Medicaid program, as they could have as an option under the Affordable Care Act. There are over 2 million individuals who would have gotten Medicaid coverage if the program had been expanded. And this is an effort to deal with the fact that those states chose not to expand Medicaid on their own. So the two ways to approach this. The first is there's an effort to make individuals in those states available, have subsidies be made available to them for the next 2 years, so that they can, in effect, get free access to the Affordable Care Act with these enhanced subsidies that they otherwise wouldn't be eligible for. And then in 2025, the federal government would actually create a new federal Medicaid program that would operate in those states and contract directly with private health plans to serve those populations. So between the effort to create this direct Medicaid, federalized Medicaid program in those 12 states, and the efforts that I've already referenced to enhance the subsidies in the Affordable Care Act, there's a target here of about 7 million people who currently don't have health insurance who could potentially achieve that coverage if both of these provisions became law. In the Medicare arena, a key priority for House progressives and for Senate progressives, Senator Bernie Sanders has highlighted this, is expansion of Medicare to cover dental, vision, and hearing services. That's a key ask that's currently in this package. There are also provisions dealing with drug pricing. One specific one that's likely to survive no matter what else is done in drug pricing is an effort to cap out-of-pocket prescription drug costs for Medicare enrollees. There's currently a $6,500 a year out-of-pocket cap, and this legislation would limit that to $2,000 per year. That's likely to survive. There's bipartisan support for that. Some differences about what the dollar amount should be, but there is bipartisan support. The other drug pricing piece here, though, drug affordability piece here, is highly controversial and may or may not survive in its current form. And it's the provision that gives the federal government the ability to directly negotiate Medicare prices, drug prices with pharmaceutical companies. This has been highly controversial. It's a very high priority for the Democratic leadership to get this provision through. Not only because of the benefit it provides to beneficiaries, there's a reduction in the out-of-pocket costs that Medicare beneficiaries would pay. There's a reduction in Medicare premiums that would occur. There's also a provision here that directly benefits people in private health insurance, in that the bill as it's currently drafted in the House version, at least, would give access to these savings to private health insurance plans. So if the federal government took one of these 50 drugs, and there's a limit on how many drugs per year you can negotiate, and they drove the price down, that reduced price would be offered to private health plans, and they'd be able to reduce the cost of prescription drugs for their private health insurance beneficiaries. I'll talk more about the fate of this when I get to the end of this summary. There are other provisions that deal with infrastructure issues. Again, healthcare infrastructure issues. The bipartisan bill that's been referenced, the $1 trillion package that got all those Republican senators to vote for it, did almost nothing on the healthcare side of the equation. That was all deferred for this reconciliation package. There's in this current package $10 billion reserved for the Hill-Burton program, a program that was created in 1946 to directly help hospitals do construction projects. These are hospitals that serve underserved communities. Certainly Santa Clara County's system could benefit from this $10 billion package if it survives. There's also a $10 billion provision to help community health centers enhance their infrastructure needs as well. So these are some of, and there are several more, and they're contained, many of them are contained in the written report attached to your agenda. But these are some of the key elements of the reconciliation package that's being negotiated. Now, we all know, and I think Prime Policy did an excellent job of describing the ins and outs of this very complicated negotiation that's currently going on, involving Senators Manchin and Sinema, House and Senate progressives, and the White House. A lot of interplay going on. We know the price tag's going to go down. It's not going to stay at 3.5 trillion. That Senator Manchin and Sinema made it clear that's not approvable in the Senate. And President Biden recently told the House Democrats they've got to work on a smaller package. It's unclear where this will all end up. I've talked before about differing priorities here. You've got the House leadership wanting to strengthen Medicaid and the Affordable Care Act. Senate progressives and House progressives want to do that, but they also want to add to that the Medicare expansion of benefits. Again, hard to pay for all of that in the current form if you push the price down. We also know on the drug pricing piece that because of the resistance to that, and it's not only a resistance from the Senate Democrats that have been mentioned, who are reluctant to see the full package pass, but as we previously reported, there are House Democrats who do not want to vote for the drug pricing piece with direct Medicare negotiations in its current form. And Speaker Pelosi is going to be challenged to get the votes for this package with that package unchanged. So there are negotiations underway that could reduce the number of drugs per year subject to this negotiation. And this negotiation could potentially de-link the Medicare pricing to private health insurance. As I mentioned a few minutes ago, one of the benefits of this is private health insurance plans can access that discounted price. And one of the issues being discussed now is, do we need to de-link that and take away the private health insurance benefit? So unclear where this will all end up. But I do want to say one final thing about how these negotiations can be conducted. So it's 3.5 trillion to pay for everything fully for, in most cases, 10 full years. So you could certainly reduce the price by dropping provisions. You could take the Medicare expansion of dental and vision and hearing and say, we're not going to do that. It's too expensive. That's $300 or $400 billion. Or you could say, we're going to guarantee that for 5 years or 3 years, not for 10 years. The cost goes down it creates a cliff in 3 to 4 to 5 years where there'll be a battle about extending it and the need to find the funding and the offsets to extend it. And that's something that Democrats don't want to do. They want the full package. But part of this negotiation may be not so much taking away these provisions and the provisions beyond healthcare, the child tax credits, the free community college, the pre-K education, rather than have them be funded for 10 years, you could end up funding them for 5 years or 3 years and create a reduced cost by doing that. So just a final observation about the way these negotiations may play out. As Rich Mead indicated, no one knows when this will complete. It might be weeks, it might be a few months, but there is still a sense of urgency to get this done. And I do think, as I think Mr. Mead indicated, there's substantial consensus on the part of the Democrats about the importance of getting this done. And I still think it is going to get done. Again, the price tag, we don't know. The full scope, we don't know, but I think it will get done.
Thank you, Mr. Margolin. A couple of questions, and then I'll turn to my colleague, Supervisor Lee. Did I conclude correctly? I know I concluded, did I conclude correctly from the combination of comments that the third way, or the second or third way to reduce the cost of the Medicare expansion is to means test that program as well for folks on Medicare?
I didn't mention that. And
right.
I don't know. I think that would be difficult to achieve. The means testing is definitely on the agenda. So for instance, free community college, Senator Manchin and others think that should be means tested. And there are many other provisions here where there's a means test debate going on. But that would create a precedent within the Medicare program that I think Democrats would resist. So again, I don't know if prime policy is still on the line and if they've heard.
Thanks. That was the very issue that prompted my question, which is it would be a very different approach, even if it was only to a piece of the Medicare program. Mr. Mead, if you're still with us, did I hear that correctly earlier?
Yeah, I've heard from both Senator Manchin and Senator Sinema that any new benefits, and so that would include the Medicare dental, vision, and hearing benefits, should be means tested. I know that there's a lot of Democrats who are adamantly opposed to that because it would set up a precedent, and it would, currently there's no means testing whatsoever in the Medicare program, and it set a precedent, and they think a dangerous precedent if we begin to head down that path, because if times get tight, you could rather than being a universal benefit based upon your age, if this is a smaller benefit that I think is very much in opposition to most Democrats, except for the two very conservative Senate Democrats.
Got it. So either Mr. Margolin or Mr. Mead or both, that sounds to me like if folks are sitting around the table trying to figure out how to bring the cost down, somebody might say, well, we could means test, and somebody else might say, that's a precedent I don't want to establish for Medicare. I'd rather go to 5 years than means test. Am I imagining this conversation correctly or not so much?
I think you're imagining it exactly as it's going to occur or is occurring. And I think, again, you already have with the dental benefit, a deferral. I think it doesn't take effect till 2028, which brings the dental costs down. So I think with vision and hearing, I'm sure the Democrats who are negotiating this are much more likely to give on an implementation date. And then to the extent there's any give on means testing for reasons that Mr. Mead's already suggested, and I've suggested the precedent issue, I think they're much more likely to take a brand new benefit like free community college or the pre-K piece and work out some kind of means testing compromise than to take the existing Medicare program and create the dangerous precedent there.
Thank you. I understand. I mean, I would imagine that the Medicare expansion is, wildly popular with people there. It's a real and tangible benefit that people would like. And I understand, I think, that the reason it's at risk is primarily just a matter of cost. And if you're trying to get the number down, something's got to go. I am curious, though, to get your take on why there is the resistance to addressing drug pricing and the possible decoupling of Medicare negotiations with private plans and pricing. And is it, not to be too tactless here, but is it essentially political? Is it that people are worried about the political consequences from the pharmaceutical industry opposing that linkage?
Well, I'm sure there are some members who philosophically believe that it's an overreach for the federal government to be doing this in terms of the marketplace. But politics is, as you suggested, probably the central factor here. The pharma lobbies are very influential. It's very large, and they're working very hard to stop this. I mean, they're at risk of losing substantial revenue if this negotiation is successful. And like most industries, I won't say every industry would do this, but many industries, most industries would resist loss of revenue. And if you take the Medicare price and you apply it to the larger private insurance market, you multiply the revenue loss substantially. So I'm guessing it's responsiveness to pharma that's driving much of this.
If it was linked exclusively to Medicare, does the structure then benefit just the Medicare beneficiaries as consumers, or is there also some reduction in cost for the Medicare program, which allows people to say, now we've addressed the total cost of the program by lowering the price of those Medicare drugs?
If it applies just to Medicare, again, for what they plan to do with the savings is not so much to shore up the program. They plan to use those savings to pay for other healthcare initiatives here to help, the Medicaid expand. This is all fungible savings. So I'm not sure you'll end up with a shored up Medicare program so much as you'll fund the larger healthcare initiatives here that have to have an offset.
But those savings do not directly benefit Medicare beneficiaries as individual patients, or do they?
They do. They do in a couple of ways. So you've got your deductible, your out of pocket deductible. And if you're on Medicare, you're going to get a lower cost, a lower price on your drug. And then there's going to be people pay a Medicare premium. And that premium is the aggregation of all the costs of the service, and that will be potentially lower. The CBO and others who've looked at this do see a benefit to Medicare individual beneficiaries as well.
Thank you. And so to recap, and I apologize, I just want to make sure I've got it straight. If the Medicare only provision was there would be a benefit both to individual consumers / patients / beneficiaries, but there would also be a savings to the Medicare program at the federal level, which savings could be used to fund other programs and services.
Correct. Or applied to Medicare stability, but I think because of the need to get this reconciliation package, they're grabbing the savings to fund the other healthcare initiatives.
Yeah, and Mr. Margolin, I think you will recall, and this will help connect the dots, at least as we discuss it. I've been pursuing with tremendous help from our Valley Medical Center, a program to try and push down the cost of life-saving drugs, things like EpiPens and insulin and inhalers for what I'll call the missing middle, the folks in the healthcare system who really are deeply out of pocket on these things. And we're making progress, but I've always been hopeful for and anxious about the prospects of something larger at the national level, which is part of what continues to engage my interest. Let me go to Supervisor Lee. I'm looking at the clock here and I want to make sure I've left time for him to weigh in with comments or questions as well. Supervisor?
Yes, thank you, Chair. Thank you very much, Ms. McGowan. Always a very informative summary of what's going on and this like herding cats there. In this Build Back Better, this large regarding healthcare provisions that we talk about, are there any specific provisions there? You talked about Medicare, you talk about drug prices, expansion of like dental and vision benefits. Does it address anything about mental health care at all?
So that's a good question. I don't have the answer offhand in that, and I will provide you with the answer. I'm reasonably certain that there are mental health provisions, but they aren't top line initiatives. I'll have to research that and get back to you.
Great, thank you. Now on the couple of 10 billion, right? They say 10 billion here, 10 billion there. The Hill-Burton program to help hospitals to do construction projects, and there's the one for the community health center. On these funds that we're talking about, my question would be, when you say hospital, does it include like mental health hospitals as well?
If they are hospitals and they provide care to an underserved community, and they're licensed as hospitals, I would assume yes.
Okay, because as we are now currently in the contract of building a hospital, right, a VMC focusing on behavioral health. I'm just wondering whether if this were to pass, we'll be able to piggyback and ask for funding to help defray some of our expenses on this project that we're already going to embark on.
It's possible, but one of the things about Hill-Burton is it wasn't so much, it historically hasn't been so much focused on new construction so much as taking facilities that had were in need of rebuilding or rehabbing and providing funding for those facilities. But the program is being revived, and the rules are still yet to be fully written, and it's something for us to track and pay some attention to. It might be eligible.
Okay, good. That's only I want to make sure our administration is be closely watching it so that the money becomes available once this passes, that we do not leave money on the table, shall we say? Okay. Any other areas that you think we should be focusing on that you've mentioned? You know, talk about the extension of the ACA subsidies, the Hill-Burton healthcare workforce funds. Any other areas that you think we need to also focus as well?
Yeah, no, I think I've touched on the major areas. Again, if the ACA subsidies are extended, that's been very helpful to California in terms of getting making covered California more affordable. And you know, the Governor Newsom, prior to this federal initiative, had his own program to make the premiums more affordable with state dollars, and this enhances that and goes beyond that. So that's one of the key elements here in terms of getting coverage for people. But no, I think I've covered the major topics.
Right. So in order to reduce the 3.5 to maybe 2.5 or 2, whatever the number came out to be, you're saying that one of the ways, I guess you could call it the shell game, is just say, oh, instead of 10 years, we only do it for 2 years, 3 years, and therefore, voila. Now
they may do that, but then again, they may decide, and they give you a sense of their thought process, which again, we're all sort of speculating about. On the other hand, if you create just 2 or 3 years and you create this cliff and you've got the Congress potentially at risk of changing leadership in the next 2 years, you're putting these, if you have a Republican House in 2 years, you're putting these programs at significant risk. So the other decision the leadership has to make is, do we want to maybe have fewer programs, but lock them in so that they're not subject to the political environment of 2 years or 3 years from now? And that's a judgment call that they have to make. And they may decide to go with fewer programs locked in for a longer time period. The alternative is attractive, except if Congress turns over, if there's a change in leadership, it puts these programs at risk. So they've got a big decision to make in these negotiations, which direction to go.
Indeed. Well, thank you very much, McGowan, for a great summary here. And looking forward to more exciting news to come. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, thank you, Supervisor Lee. Thank you, Mr. Margolin. Let me go to Prime and to our staff and say last call if there are any additional comments or thoughts to share about item number 9.
No more comments from Prime.
Thank you, Mr. Mead. Ms. Christian, any reason I can't go ahead and adjourn our meeting until our next regularly scheduled meeting, which is on December 1st at 10 a.m.?
No.
All right, then let me just confirm with the clerk that we had no speakers on that last item.
That's confirmed, sir.
Thank you. Then I think we are good to go. We will, without objection and hearing none, adjourn and say thank you again to all for a very helpful and informative meeting today. We will see you again on December the 1st at our regularly scheduled 10 a.m. meeting on that day. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Recording stopped.